And we're live. Bad morning to every single motherfucker out there. Little bit of housekeeping. I'm posting today the requirements for sending us news briefs and articles. So if you are into that, keep an eye out on our Steemit. That's Bad Morning News, or follow us. Any of our social media outlets will have that in it. Also, our Discord. If you're not over there for some reason, then you're probably one of the people that's been drinking Alex Jones's unfiltered water. But that all being said, I'm going to be sharing this link in several places relatively soon, and with any luck, this show should be a relatively good one, especially since I'm going to start it out by discussing something that is relatively on the nose, not very ironic at all. This is from The Hill. Fucking while this article loads, just brace yourself, because NATO considers naming headquarters after McCain by Emily Birnbaum. NATO is considering naming its new headquarters after the late Senator John McCain. CNN reported on Wednesday. Tom Tugendhat, a member of the Conservative Party in the UK Parliament, reportedly sent NATO the request after McCain's death on Saturday. Tugendhat is the chair of the British Foreign Affairs Committee. There can be no more.
Wait 1 second. Our guys made the request?
Yes.
Oh, fuck's sake.
There can be no more fitting tribute to his career and the values that Senator McCain espoused, but also no better message for NATO to send at this time of global tension than to name its new headquarters after the American statesman, Tugendhat wrote in his proposal, according to CNN. NATO spokesperson Oana Lugansu told, I think that's how you pronounce that, maybe Lungescu, probably Lungescu, told CNN that the alliance, by the way, that's one of the reasons African Americans get pissed when you say that their names are hard to pronounce. Everybody's name is hard to pronounce. Come on. Told CNN that the alliance has received the request and it will be considered carefully. McCain was a staunch advocate. Okay, so basically the rest of this is relatively short. I'm not going to read too much more of it because I don't want to get fucking copy struck. But yeah, fucking NATO's considering naming their new headquarters they're building after McCain.
The best part is they don't understand why this is so horrendously appropriate, you know.
Well, they do, and they don't mind. I mean,
I have the impression that some of these people are just as gaslit as the general public is. Certainly not all of them, but
I think the ones at the top that would be able to approve and not approve names are laughing their asses off in the background.
Well, to me, it's like he stood for practically eternal war. I was reading some of the comments and some other articles that I was.
Yeah, I mean, not even practically. McCain was the modern American warfare state embodied, the successor of every other warmonger.
Yeah, Mr. Empire. It's like the solution to everything is war.
Yeah, and you know, while I get my next fucking pieces loaded up, because I have a few more that aren't about McCain. We actually have an article from the Free Thought Project about how Washington Post posed him next to a neo-Nazi. What do you want to get that? Because while we're talking about naming NATO headquarters after him, we should remember who he liked being around.
So yeah, this was an epic fail by WAPO. WAPO article praises McCain as human rights champion, with pic of him next to, quote, literal neo-Nazi. While praising the human rights record of John McCain, the Washington Post inadvertently revealed his support for a neo-Nazi he put in power in Ukraine. Mainstream U.S. have been singing eulogies to the late Senator John McCain after he succumbed to brain cancer last weekend. Among them is a column in the Washington Post titled, "The Human Rights Community Lost a Champion." I'm sorry, I can't read that without laughing. The human rights community lost a champion. Author Jennifer Rubin described how McCain traveled the world to meet with dissidents, criticize dictators, and support those struggling for freedom. The chief example of his rooting for the, quote, oppressed was his trip to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, during the beginnings of what would become the violent coup of 2014. On that trip, McCain, a belligerent and hawkish patriot of American interests, went on a makeshift stage at the Maidan, Kiev's Freedom Square, and told the protesters, "The free world is with you, America is with you, I am with you." He did so while standing next to one of the Ukraine's most prominent ultranationalists, a man known for openly anti-Semitic rhetoric and deemed a neo-Nazi by a number of journalists, analysts, and hate speech monitors. Zvezda is known for its support of World War II-era Ukrainian Nazi collaborators. The party has been recognized as an anti-Semitic extremist by a wide array of officials and speakers, including the European Parliament, a number of European newspapers and political scientists, and a group of Israeli Knesset members. Fast forward to 2014, and Tyagneibok is a freedom fighter, leading the Maidan uprising together with the rest of the anti-Russian group of then-opposition politicians, praised and endorsed by the West. When it came to picking official posts, however, Tyagneibok was sidelined as Petro Poroshenko won the presidency. Arseniy Yatsenyuk took the prime minister post, and Vitaly Klitschko became mayor of Kiev. Ruben, the WAPO columnist, triggered a baffled reaction when she's posted her article on Twitter. A lot of commenters pointed out who exactly her hero McCain was standing next to on the Maidan. This is one of the oddest tweets ever. J. Rubin blogger hails John Ultimate Warmonger McCain as supreme human rights champion by choosing a picture of him sharing the stage with literal Jew-hating Ukrainian Nazi Oleg Tyahnybok. They hung out quite a bit, and it shows him in like about 4 or 5 different pictures with Tyahnybok in it. It's oh god, it's just priceless. You don't usually see this much of an epic fail, you know?
Well, to be fair, Nazism isn't the worst possible ideology, and presidents and politicians have long been seen in pictures where they've been having cordial conversations with mass human rights abusers. Let's not forget the buddy-buddy relationship both Trump, Obama, and also tertiarily Bush, but only because of his relationship with Cheney and ironically McCain, with Saudi Arabian leaders, and there are huge human rights abuses that are cataloged across the globe as some of the worst. Let's not forget that neo-Nazism and Nazism in general is not the worst possible ideology, so it's not like he's alone in this, but that just goes to show you that all politicians are bastards. APAB, you know? We could just like cut to the chase and say that this is normal.
It is par for the course at the moment, especially but it's just the fact that you'd expect that these people would go, whoa, hang on, like at least one of the editors would have picked up on the fact, isn't that really right-wing guy that we don't like?
Yeah,
that he's pictured with. Clicks. Yeah, there's clicks, and then there's shooting yourself in the foot and making your point invalid.
Ironically, it's the Lügenpresse.
I mean, the thing that gets me about all this is that when you see it, you think, wait, hang on, are they doing this Onion style? And if so, are the other articles in WAPO going down these satirical routes? Because at the moment, I'm not certain what it is. I mean, that Hill one, I'm beginning to wonder if it was written by somebody who really meant it. Because part of me just can't believe that they'd be that crass to go, oh, yes, he was such a champion of peace. The guy who constantly said we need to go to war over practically everything made a song out of bombing Iran and basically decided that even though he was a POW, war is preferable.
Well,
this is the guy we want.
But he was treated better than the others, as far as I remember. And he was also a POW, but then ran POW camps for enemy combatants. So, yeah, he was a POW. Yeah, he was tortured, but that's zero excuse for the way that he behaved. and it was almost always used as a way to, like, sort of slap any subject related to him down as, well, obviously he's a hero because he's a war hero. He's a hero. If you disagree,
if you say something enough, it must be true.
Yeah, we'll just drive it down their throats like the steel wool on a Catholic rack. We're fucked,
Well, I just can't believe anybody's even swallowing it. I mean, you just have to look at his record. Well, and it doesn't even take much. Yeah, somehow I think the problem is that they're lubricating things with acid now. It's not really with a lubricant anymore.
Yeah, well, we got a few comments to address, and then we can move on to the next articles, which are less about McCain and more about other things. Which is fortunate because McCain is one of those historical mistakes we have to learn from, but that doesn't mean that this is the McCain show now. No. Fucking Finian says, "Hey all, yep, he was an ambassador of continual military conflict. Yep. I still suspect there's a new agency out there connected to the State Department, but doing offensive global military coordination. Could just be the old classic agency, though. West wanted to strike at Russia and make the Ukraine unstable. Who better to take up the cause than fascists in the area? They're being used as useful idiots by Western intel. Don't forget that Ukraine's gold was flown out as it was stocked up with IMF and other debts." Yep. Yeah, and that's the key right there, because whenever you want to destabilize a region, you need to have that region look naturally unstable in order to justify war funding.
Can I just add as well, I've been to Ukraine. I have met quite a few of the people there. They're very nice people. Their government's fucking mental, but they're fucking nice. Right. They're good. It's not the people that are the problem here necessarily. It's usually the state.
Government poisons everything. But like, and so there's that element of it. There's that element of it where you want the government unstable, so you remove their economic backing. But there's also the element of essentially the warfare state requires that the region look naturally unstable. So you've got to talk to some of their local leaders and make sure that those local leaders are on board. And then you've got to talk to some extremist leaders and make sure that the conflicts that are brewing look like they're conflicts of Ukraine and not something artificial. And that's how they get away with it. That's how they got away with war in Iran and Iraq. That's how they get away with having no boots on the ground in Syria, but somehow still more military might in Afghanistan than we've seen in like 5 years.
Yeah, apparently that war's over, by the way.
Yeah, no. But like, the reason those things get to happen so frequently is because of these extremist leaders in those regions that the U.S. primed for conflict. And that's one of the reasons you see so many pictures of world leaders with people like neo-Nazis, Muslim extremists, and basically mujahideen that turned into Taliban and Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, ISIS, any of these number of splinter factions off those groups, because you've got to hand some money, some funds, some training and some armament toward the people that are going to be the reason that you can form a profitable empire of war overseas. You've got to do that first, because the regions weren't that fucked up before the US got there.
Let's move away from war and international politics and head into something we're fairly familiar, I think. Shall we discuss censorship again?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. So apparently, some people are starting to speak out. I mean, we had in chat a few days ago a soon-to-be ex-Google employee coming out saying that Google's going to have quite a lot of turnover probably this year in headcount. On top of that, Facebook is dealing with a little bit of an internal revolt. From the New York Times, no less, Dozens at Facebook unite in challenge to its, quote, intolerant liberal culture. From San Francisco by Kate Conga and Shira Frankel. The post went up quietly on Facebook's internal message boards last week, titled, "We have a problem with political diversity." It quickly took off inside the social network. "We are a political monoculture that is intolerant of different views," Brian Emergery, a senior Facebook engineer, wrote in the post, which was obtained by the New York Times. "We claim to welcome all perspectives, but are quick to attack, often in mobs, anyone who presents a view that appears to be in opposition to left-leaning ideology." Since the post went up, more than 100 Facebook employees have joined Mr. Emergery to form an online group called FBers for Political Diversity, according to two people who viewed the group's page and who were not authorized to speak publicly. The aim of the initiative, according to Mr. Emergery's memo, is to create a space for ideological diversity within the company. Now, to be quite frank, I applaud this endeavor, because the only way to fix something like that is to actively oppose it from within and without, so that you get both sides of the market, the labor market and the consumer, fighting against you to say, look, enough's enough. You need to back off on this. Since the new group has upset other Facebook employees who say its online posts were offensive to minorities. One engineer declined to be identified for fear of retaliation, said several people had lodged complaints with their managers about FBers for political diversity and were told that it had not broken any company rules. Now, this is New York Times, so if you do read it, be aware that it has a subscription system and everything else, and there's quite a lot more to this article, to be honest, because I'll kick in a little further bit down, actually. A social network has sometimes struggled to integrate conservatives into its leadership. Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus and maker of virtual reality goggles that Facebook acquired, was pressured to leave the company last year, months after news spread that he had secretly donated to an organization dedicated to spreading anti-Hillary Clinton internet memes. And Peter Thiel, an outspoken supporter of Mr. Trump, has faced calls for his resignation from Facebook's board. So, as I said, there is some significant pressure on one side of the argument. That's not to say, and I can almost hear you now, Jeremiah. It's like, it's not just conservatives. I'm not going to say it is just conservatives, because I'll recognize quite openly that the left is getting penalized for this when they don't toe the line in certain ways. And it's both the moderates and the extremists who get flagged, because effectively what we are dealing with is a bunch of brigading, I think is the right term for it. This is how online discourse goes now. You offend somebody, they get riled up, and if they've got any kind of following whatsoever, they mass flag you for some sort of malfeasance, spam, hate speech, sexual content. I mean, I've seen every single possible tactic used against people now to justify taking down their content, even when there's no justification whatsoever under that particular type of flagging. I mean, some of my good mates have left social networks completely because the companies have said, no, we're not telling you why you got flagged or who flagged you. We're just telling you this is what you're being flagged for. And if you don't like it, tough. Nobody can see this now. And the problem is that they can see that it's happening, because usually there'll be some sort of bug or feature that highlights it in a notification, for example, but doesn't show you the post because it's been flagged down.
Yeah. Well, that's called shadow banning.
Yeah. Google does this, by the way, on their social network, just as much as Twitter. There's a method where they haven't fixed the notification system, so this will probably permaban it, but the notifications will make it appear, but you can't see the post. It's as if it's been deleted from Google. Well, but in most cases, it hasn't.
And to be completely honest, though, Google can't do anything as much as Twitter does it because Twitter has many more users and many more posts going up. It's a matter of volume at that point, because most people don't even know about Google Plus, much less use it.
I found out, actually, thanks to Mr. Medica, that Google Plus is actually the 5th most popular social network out on the internet.
Right. But the question is, how many of those people know about other platforms? The other question is, how many people are on there compared to total global population? How many people are on there compared to the other platforms? And how many of that is overlapped by people that barely ever use the service? These are all data points that you would have to collect before knowing how many people know about it. But most of the time when I tell people about Google Plus these days, they're like, I don't know what that is. Literally, they say that. The only reason anybody knows what Google Plus is if they decided to use the plus functionality connected to their YouTube commenting profile to add a profile picture. And even then, some of them don't have any idea what it is. They just think, hey, I've got to go over to this dumb fucking site to add my profile picture.
I remember back in the day when they used to advertise it was Google, but it was basically social networks, Facebook, but not done by Facebook. And loads of tech people jumped on it because of that. And now it's just Facebook again, minus the advertising. And even then, you still get solicitations. You still get shit tons of spam. And especially if you've got any follow-up.
Like, it's not like you don't get solicitations from Google just because you're not getting them in Google Plus. You get ads in Google Mail all the time, especially if you don't have an ad blocker.
Yep. It's getting quite frustrating, actually, to use a lot of their products because, I mean, both as a customer, like an individual customer and a business perspective, they've got a real problem with QA. The quality of their products have gone down consistently over the years. And I personally tie this to not hiring on merit to a large extent, because that is usually where it starts falling down.
I'd say that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is that they're monopolistic. Everybody forgets that Google gets a huge amount of money from the state to maintain huge data monopolies in certain markets, not the least of which is the engine of spying they developed called Google Earth that nobody recognizes as an engine of spying. So they get regular money in for their development from people who don't have an interest in Google Plus functionality, to put it extremely gently. And so, yeah, maybe there's a problem with like merit hiring, but the primary problem is that they don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, they don't need to give a shit. They've got money. We're talking about NASA paying for this chick to jack off dolphins yesterday, and we were talking about Harvard University, I think it was, paying to study ducky corkscrew penises. This should give you an idea of what kind of, like, essentially fucking bullshit Google can get away with, because they constantly get money from other agencies, specifically sometimes the US government, and various other global governments, especially the ones involved in the Five Eyes of global intelligence, to build projects that'll help them spy on people. And that's what Google, Facebook,
Google can do whatever the fuck it wants to, and that's just not even in question.
Well, there's one under the law. Technically, I don't think they can, but there's implementation.
When has any multinational corporation or government given a fuck about laws? Laws are
that's
for the
true.
little people.
Yeah, laws are for us plebs. It's not for them. Well, speaking of a bit of lawlessness, how about we go a bit more European for a moment? The big news in Britain at the moment is we're kind of on the verge of World War III again. Scallop Wars, a brief history of British and French fishermen muscling in on each other's catch, feud over shellfish dredging, long-running, and ill-tempered. Now, for a bit of background, basically, at the moment, it's under the EU, it's been fairly open. Everybody's been raiding everybody else's waters within Europe. That's about the only way to describe it, because they're all co-joint owned. And now things are getting a bit more intense. French and British trawlermen have again come to blows in the English Channel over the question of scallop fishing rights. Rocks, smoke bombs, and other projectiles were seen being thrown at English and Scottish vessels by a flotilla of rival French boats in the Bay of Seine off the coast of Normandy in the early hours of Tuesday morning. The skirmish has been branded clear piracy by the Scottish White Fish Producers Association, as the British were harvesting the fishing grounds entirely illegally when they came under attack. But Britain's National Federation of Fishermen Organizations, NFFO, has appealed for calm. We have raised the matter with the British government and have asked for protection for our vessels, which are fishing legitimately, said Barry Dees of NNFO's chief executive. Hang on, it should be NFFO. The deeper issues behind the clashes should be settled by talking around the table, not on the high seas where people could be hurt. Now, to give you some context here, skipping ahead a bit, tensions over the issue have rumbled on for the past 15 years, with the last major blow taking place 15 miles off the coast of Le Havre, which is still international waters, on October 12th, 2012. When 40 French boats cornered their rivals, which consisted of 5 English and Scottish ships, attempting to ram them and throwing rocks and nets with a view to damage their propellers and engines. An English rugby shirt was even burnt as provocation, according to Channel 4 News.
Oh my God, this is wild. Not to interrupt.
No, it's fine. This is what I was kind of hoping would happen, because I honestly, Poe's law is really fucking with my head now, man. And the Frenchmen justified their aggression by insisting the British had drifted 12 miles inside an exclusion zone demarcated by the EU's common fisheries policy, an accusation hotly refuted by the opposing side. The French Coast Guard was criticized for failing to intervene, but argued the conflict had taken place outside French territorial waters, meaning it had no jurisdiction. Both sides called on their respective navies to restore the peace.
Oh shit, that could have gotten bad.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This really could devolve into World War III. Fishing rights. Honestly, that is what World War III could become over. Who gets this cod? Since that time, an uneasy truce is held after the UK agreed to keep larger boats away from French waters in exchange for additional access rights. Commercial fishing is big business, and Britain has had a number of other heated encounters with rivals over the years. The Cherbourg dispute of late March and early April 1993 saw the UK again exchanging angry words with its neighbors over crab fishing in the Channel Islands. The Cod Wars, only slightly less tense than that age of mutually assured destruction with which it coincided, saw Britain at odds with Iceland throughout the 1950s and 70s over cod and whitefish in the North Atlantic. Basically, England has been fighting to fish its seas properly for a very long time. And the problem is nobody really agrees with where they're allowed to fish, because everybody has their own rules and nobody seems to pay attention to anybody else's rulings, often because they're contradictory. Funny that. The Royal Navy did deploy 37 warships to protect British interests during a period in which Icelandic Coast Guard used net cutters to sever trawler hulls, and rifle fire was seen, indicating just how serious the feud was taking. We almost went to war with Russia over an assault on a fisherman in 1904 as a result of the Dogger Bank incident, when a Russian warship mistook a North Sea fisherman for hostile Japanese ships in thick fog and opened fire. Basically, we've been fighting over the waters in and around Britain for, well, the better part of 2 centuries, probably. And Britain doesn't back down when it comes to this kind of crap, because there's a deep-rooted fishing culture here. Funnily enough, fish and chips is part of that deep-rooted culture, and there is a lot of commerce based on it. Most of the coastal cities have a lot of fishermen, funnily enough. It's a good way to make money, and it's a hard life. So to then have a flotilla of 40 ships basically trying to ram you out of the water and sabotage your boats, it's, yeah, piracy. I can't say any other word for it. There's really nothing more. And I'm just wondering, when is the Armada going to be sent?
Well, and to be clear, authentic piracy, not what most people think of these days.
Oh yeah, this is actual piracy. This is the kind of thing that, like, going over and stealing the ship. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to sabotage the fucker. That's still piracy.
So, proposition here. This could actually be a great opportunity to spin it towards the decentralization of the use of force and national militaries. These fishing companies should start establishing their own peacekeeping navies to protect the fishing boats.
Well, if the British Navy won't protect them, who will?
That's what I'm saying, you know? Like, I realize we're trying to have a bad morning here, but if this could lead to privatized navies, you know?
There used to be something called a merchant navy over here where, I mean, large numbers of merchant companies in Britain were given basically charters by the government to have their own private armadas. I mean, that concept in Pirates of the Caribbean is fairly true.
And the merchant marines are still a very real thing, but they've got a very bad name for a few operations.
Oh, yeah, obviously. I mean,
and isn't it funny, by the way, that like all these less than public institutions, they all get to fucking be the immediate bad guy when one or two scandals break out, but like the U.S. government and like countless of its allies are capable of being operated on scandals almost like a car on gas, and they get to continue operating almost unquestioned because of freedom or something.
Well, sometimes it's just nothing to see here, move along. I mean, I've seen that now so many times, it's not even funny anymore. I mean, there's I saw it the other day. I mean, who was it? Oh, God. I think it was WAPO again. Came out with an article basically. Oh, no, it was CNN. They came out with an article saying, or a news brief saying that there is no censorship going on. It's all fake news. Nobody's being deplatformed. So, to which Alex Jones basically replied, "Oh, I guess I was wrong. I guess we weren't taken off the internet for 2 weeks." And all this other stuff, he just lambasted them by basically, "I'm so sorry." He basically put on this fake act. Yeah. And it was hilarious to listen to because the usual fire and brimstone, that's not needed anymore. You just have to point out how stupid it sounds. Because the evidence is there.
So I'm gonna address these comments, and then I'm gonna get right into the next article because I think that the fact that you just brought up CNN is rather appropriate to something that's trending on Twitter right now.
Oh, okay.
So Finian says, "Ask Western Ukrainians about the entire battalion that was cut off and left for dead by government commanders. The entire unit was destroyed. Separatists called their destruction, quote, the meat grinder. But if you report a pedo or defender of pedos, your reports are ignored." I think those were separated topics. Yeah. And that's because these social media things, they can't, and to be fair to them, they can't address every possible pedophilia case of people being like on kids on their sites. They can't do it because there are countless accounts set up. And, to be completely straight, not all of those accounts are legitimate. Like there are some obvious ones where they're trying to smear the image of somebody, like this quote anarchist account where they were putting the FBI symbol for pedophilia on people's backpacks at a pride parade, and I got asked personally to respond to this, and I was like, fuck you, I'm not going to respond to it. You want to bring up something serious. You want to bring up something where the person is verifiably an anarchist. Maybe we can talk, but I'm not going to do this thing with you where I'm, you know, like having a discussion
you're loading
about
the questions.
Right. Well, where I'm having a discussion about an account that's online that anybody could have set up for any purpose. I'm not going to do that. It's not legitimate. It's not like they attached their name to it. If they attached their name to it, if I could follow their name to something, that'd be separate. But right now, these pedo accounts can be set up by anyone for anything, and usually it seems to be to smear like somebody's political ideology. So be careful, because you're being smeared by a lot of these people too, Finian. Just something I'm going to say on that issue. What is
I mean,
it?
from my perspective on that issue, just quickly,
Yeah.
you aren't just going to be ignored. If you're credible, you're going to be killed. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I kind of raised that point yesterday too in regards to whistleblowers. Obviously, that's a slightly different topic, but you know,
Well, you know,
Well, I mean, that cardinal who's basically had to go on the fucking lam.
yeah.
Well, and yesterday, though, before we logged off, there were a boatload of comments about that. And one of them was asking you to respond, so maybe you could do that today.
Okay.
What about Edward Snowden? Like, does that whistleblowing case, do you suspect him of being a fake whistleblower because he's public about it? I think that was directed at Minark.
So, I'm sure this is a loaded question in our circles, and it might be a loaded response, but I would say that maybe perhaps we should consider the legitimacy of his motivations, if not necessarily his actions.
Well, what's...
You know, the things that he revealed are obviously very real and very horrible, but then the question becomes, who was he acting on behalf of?
Why does that
Because
matter?
This is the problem as well. There's no way of knowing.
Symptomatic of something larger.
The problem is that the problem with Snowden, and this is going to be controversial because I know where some of this is going to be coming from. There's basically a current conspiracy theory that Snowden's actually working for the CIA. He did the release so that the CIA could get all of the NSA's happy little codes that they weren't allowed to get any other way. Because once it became public domain, they could build their own network, knowing full well that people wouldn't properly defend against it, because most of them still don't really want to believe that it's true.
But what actual proof do they have of that? Because yeah, that might work, but that's like a Sonic fan theory, you know? You can.
I know it is, and this is the problem with it. Even if it is true, at the moment WikiLeaks released all that data on the CIA's Vault 7, and I think there was a Vault 8 as well. But Vault 7 at least basically broke the back of that network completely because people actually responded to that one. They actually went, holy shit, this is creating serious faults, and they looked into it and they gave them new names to classify the malware that were being used and all sorts of stuff. I mean, Intel has been on a pressure cooker because of this, because they keep on finding new ways that the hardware can be compromised from a security perspective, and new ways the same exploit can be used because they keep patching it in a way that can still be used by the government, obviously.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing that makes it very difficult to say it's the CIA. Is he still working for the NSA? Or is it just all a fucking fan fiction conspiracy system and he just was a whistleblower who fled the fucking country and had a very good network to fall back on? Personally, I think his network indicates some sort of government activity, getting him out of get him out of the country as quickly as they did. That indicates some sort of funding. If it was the CIA, if it was the NSA, I don't know. It could be he was basically a double agent or a single agent. It's impossible to tell.
That's the problem with this sort of thing. Maybe have that in the back of your mind that it's possible, but have that in the back of your mind with fucking everybody. The idea that we're supposed to think that he is without any actual knowledge of what he is seems kind of absurd to me. Like, it
the messenger doesn't matter. For me, the messenger really doesn't matter. It's
as long as we're getting the truth. As long as we're getting little bits of information, and as long as we're capable of realizing what CIA story within a story distractionary tactics are, and recognizing that we could be being led down the wrong path here.
Precisely. And this is the thing. If he is telling, there's no reason to suspect him to be lying about this, given the response to it and given what has been found since then.
Yeah.
There is no reason to believe that it was false.
See, if I can jump back in here, that was entirely the point I was trying to make, too. Obviously, what he revealed is legitimate, and we should be glad he revealed it. I just keep that doubt in the back of my mind at all times. Like I said, with every whistleblower who doesn't get done in.
Well, right, but you should have that with everybody, is my point.
That's what I'm saying. I do have that with everybody.
Yeah,
okay, so bringing it up with Snowden in specific seems to, like, and I've seen it with Snowden in specific, seems to be more of a discrediting operation than anything else, because specifically, there's no, like, proof for Snowden that there isn't for anybody else.
Yeah, and he has been actually, in a lot of his messages, fairly consistently anti-state, which is surprising to me.
Well, it shouldn't
be quite frank.
The most verdant anti-state people are often the people who worked in it and could see the machinations grinding the average person into a paste.
Which then leads me to believe that both conspiracies are illegitimate. Either that or he is the most epic gray man who has ever existed.
Yeah, well, and that's very unlikely.
Yeah, but I don't consider that likely.
Either way, to get to the rest of the comments, Camp says, how many of it is active users? Yeah, that's also a good question, because I don't see most people on Google+. And the only people who are there regularly are there regularly enough to know people by name who they aren't even in friendship with. Like, and so they'll be like regularly talking in certain political groups, and that's it. That's very specifically it. Google Plus is mostly unused in that regard. It's either used by boomers or people who talk about these sorts of things like politics and whatever in very specific key groups. And I know that because, like, I'm a member of multiple groups that sort of like talk between them on Google Plus, and I've watched this happen more than once, where people will be like specific about specific people, but it's not because of the platform, it's because of those people. So the platform isn't that good or that popular or that well used.
Well, and part of the problem as well is because of Google's algorithms and whatnot, the stuff that was getting like popular or that was trending well gets suppressed and people are starting to notice it, and they've become very open about it.
Right.
And as a result, they're migrating. I mean, most of the people I have communicated with regularly on Google Plus are now migrating to Minds or Steemit or any of the other platforms. And a lot of the big names online, Styx, Raise the Fist, Sargon, Paul Joseph Watson, all these people are talking about the alternative media sources. Yeah, they're moving to them. They're going there. And again, they will take their audiences with them.
I can't stress this enough. Don't just move, diversify. Because you can't reach the new audience, which is building over there. And if you want to cede territory, you can do that. But I think that's a way to lose a war of attrition, which is what this is. And they have many more forces. So,
well,
like,
I agree.
Attrition with superior forces.
I agree. You should stream to every location you can, people. Using any means that you can that aren't directly linked to the groups that you're trying to get around. So this is why we're going to be going on via Discord from next week. This is why we're trying to all get to grips with a whole new set of tech. I've no idea. I've been having to play with OBS for the past week, and it's doing my head in, if I'm honest, but it's I'm having to do it. I've got to create my own content. I can't rely on Google services anymore.
Well, right. So Finian says, stopped wasting my time on G Plus when I confirmed they content filter public posts. And he also says, check out Steam. he also says check out SteamPeak site, by the way, way better UI to default Steam it. So I'm going to check that out shortly. But he also says Google Earth and Maps are wonderful for PIs, which he is one, so he knows that.
They're wonderful for anyone who wants to gather, track information. That's what they were designed for.
Right. But what he's saying is that like it's good for private intelligence, so it's probably double good for public information.
Right. I understand that.
If a private investigator can get good information on them, you'd better damn well believe they've got an even better system available to the government. It'll be a lot worse of a UI experience. I'll guarantee that as well. It'll not be designed for the user. No, this is based on how most government projects tend to go.
Except that this one specifically isn't. Google Earth specifically is like it's the same UI that users get, only with some other features, and also the fact that they can see a lot of this stuff live, depending on which satellites are passing over.
Now I'm starting to understand. Okay, so Google's making decent products for the state to use and giving us the crap hand-me-downs that they couldn't, that were basically the original prototypes that didn't quite work as well.
It's not that though. What that is, they're giving us the version that will be accepted, that will be accepting of, so that the average person is used to looking at themselves from the sky, and so that the average person doesn't care as much that the government is doing it. If I can do it, if I can get access to this on my phone, then of course they can get access. It's designed to numb us. It's specifically a psyop. And it's working. It's working brilliantly because people can get to the pizza joint on time. So, I mean, yes, specifically, it is the same software, the same UI. It's just with more features, because this is a specifically like intelligence-oriented project that the end user of has become wide adopted, because they were like, yeah, hey, let's throw this at them. Make sure that they're okay with it as long as they get some tchotchkes. And in this particular case, the tchotchke is a satellite view of their house.
I do have to wonder sometimes if the right to privacy is officially dead. Not just de facto, but also de jure, because of the way that technology has progressed. It's almost impossible.
Well, to that, again, I will say it's been dead.
But let's get to a couple more comments, and why don't you finish off Jeremiah with CNN?
So Finian says, I was basically talking to myself and a few friends, even for public posts, and he says he had 11,000 followers on Google+. He also says, okay, so this is all related to that boat thing. Individuals used to own fleets of warships. And of course that those individuals became privateers for the government, so whatever. Yeah, I pissed off some pedo defenders, so their response was to say I'm a pedo, which with an obviously faked image. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. These things aren't designed to actually promote pedophilia. They're designed to demote other people. And when you recognize them as the weapons they are, you recognize that the quote pedophilia problem on social networks isn't actually there in most cases. And I'm pretty unpopular in some circles for saying this, because it goes against people's narrative. But a lot of the people that, for instance, people like Twitter's side were taking down and still are, which good, whatever, are there to fuck with people very specifically.
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can do it as well. You can mess with images and screen grab after the fact. It's possible to tweak all sorts of things if you know how to use developer tools on Chrome or any other browser, basically. Right. It's not hard.
Right. So
I know people who used to make unlike buttons on Facebook for so that they could screen grab it and click it.
Yeah, well, another reason I'm withdrawing from most social media, this is still Finian, just not a worthy battle to be in when the platforms are against me. Yeah, definitely. And it's a good thing to remember that these platforms are designed for intelligence, and that means that every piece of information you give them assists their data mining network. And there are ways to fuck with that, but the more overt you are about it, the more likely their platform is to say this person isn't a data point we want and just throw you out. So keep that in mind too. Rebel with a Cause says, sorry I'm late dealing with work drama. We're glad you showed up. Vinian says, Intel community wants Snowden dead. Yes, they do. And I have very little reason to believe that he's a fake whistleblower. I have very little reason to believe that. Rebel says, I work in civil engineering. Don't get me started on waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah. Well, and that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, is the sort of person who's involved in these things is the sort of person who has to shove a lot of their feelings down in order to keep being involved in them. And when they stop working for them, oftentimes it's no holds barred. They're very much aggressive towards these institutions because they've seen these things, and they're the ones who had to say, fuck it, I want to keep my job. So they keep their job and they say fuck it, and then they don't get any play with that regard. But then when they finally have nothing left to lose there, it's open season on the information they have. Finian says there's a government version of Google Earth different in classified data set. Yeah, and that's what I was talking about, because I heard about that. I did a little digging when I read a Wikipedia article, maybe it's censored now, that says that Google was funded by Keyhole, which, by the way, funds things like Pokemon Go,
they fund Niantic,
funds things like Facebook and In-Q-Tel, funds all of these institutions that are responsible for fucking with you with your data. And so be very sure that Google has better versions of everything.
Look, just to make this quick, because we do need to hit that last article you shared. That's a doozy. I will speak anecdotally very quickly. One time I went out with some sales teams to the BBC to try and pitch the idea of personality data as a form of targeting. Their immediate interest was in how to change people's personalities, not how to actually message people in an efficient way, which is what we were actually trying to do. And I had to spend a good 15 minutes explaining to them, and they still didn't get it, that you cannot do that without basically first causing severe trauma and then convincing them to manipulate their personality into a different form in order to fix that trauma. That's the only way it works in reality. You can't just show them a picture and poof, they're suddenly more open. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to somehow traumatize them first. Then they may become more open. There's every chance they may become more closed as well.
Problem, reaction, solution, which reminds me, before we get too lost in the weeds on that, this article from The Intercept, which is sort of pseudo trending on Twitter right now with like a few thousand people tweeting about it. CNN, credibly accused of lying to its audience about a key claim in its blockbuster Cohen story, refuses to comment. And I'm just going to read the first quarter of this article. CNN's blockbuster July 26th story, and this is by Glenn Greenwald. CNN's blockbuster July 26th story, this is on The Intercept, that Michael Cohen intended to tell special counsel Robert Mueller that he was present when Donald Trump was told in advance about his son's Trump Tower meeting with various Russians, includes a key statement about its sourcing that credible reporting now suggests was designed to have misled its audience. Yet CNN simply refuses to address the serious ethical and journalistic questions raised about its conduct. The substance of the CNN story itself regarding Cohen, which made headline news all over all the world, and which CNN hyped as a bombshell, has now been retracted by other news outlets that originally purported to, quote, confirm CNN's story. That's because the anonymous source for this confirmation, Cohen lawyer Lanny Davis, now admits that in essence his confirmation was false. As a result, both the Washington Post and the New York Post outed Davis as their anonymous source and then effectively retracted their stories, confirming parts of CNN's report. This is the editor's note on the Washington Post. For this story, Lanny Davis, an attorney for Michael Cohen, provided information as an unnamed source, saying Cohen told associates he had witnessed a 2016 exchange in which Donald Trump Jr. informed his father that he expected to receive damaging information about Hillary Clinton. On August 26, Davis agreed to reveal his identity as the source of that information and said he is no longer confident that it is true. CNN, however, has retracted nothing. All inquiries to the network are directed to a corporate spokesperson who simply says, quote, "We stand by our story and are confident in our reporting of it." A new newsletter sent Sunday night from CNN's two media reporters, Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy, contained the same corporate language, but addressed none of the questions raised about CNN's report. It is currently possible that CNN had other sources for this story besides Davis, who now repudiates it. It's hard to see how CNN's story could be true, given that Davis Cohen's own lawyer explicitly says that Cohen has no information that Trump had prior knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting, that Cohen cannot and will not tell Mueller that this happened, and that Davis's prior claims about Cohen's knowledge and intentions are false. Axios reported that Cohen testified under oath to Congress that he has no knowledge that Trump had prior knowledge of the meeting, and repeated this to leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee again after CNN's report. Davis now says Cohen, rather than intending to tell Mueller he has such information, stands by his longtime claim that he has none. So the key people with knowledge on what CNN reported, Cohen and his own lawyer, insists that CNN's reporting about what Cohen knows and intends to tell Mueller is false. Nonetheless, it's possible that other sources did tell CNN that Cohen does have this information and intends to share it with Mueller, and that Cohen's own lawyer is either unaware of this or is lying about it. It's not likely, obviously, but it's theoretically possible. Unfortunately, CNN refuses to tell us anything about what it itself said was a, quote, blockbuster story, so it's impossible to know. So there's much more to this article.
Can I quickly highlight some...
And I would recommend everybody read it when they get a chance. This is on The Intercept. It's by Glenn Greenwald, and I hope that everybody does, because there's a shit ton of good shit in this article. If you pick it apart, you can find a huge amount of skeletons for other stories.
Oh man, there's a quick bullet point list of some stories and some key ones. They're all fake news from the mainstream media, like Russia hacked into U.S. electrical grid to deprive Americans of heat during winter. WikiLeaks' long-documented relationship with Putin. Russians hacked into a Ukrainian artillery app. And links have been found between Trump ally Anthony Scaramucci and Russian investment fund under investigation. All of these from really huge names in media.
One last point I'd like to contribute here, because we're basically out of time. But in summation of all of that, I'd just like to say it's fairly obvious that Mockingbird never ended, and we should all be well aware of that at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Get woke.
And then realize that what you're seeing might not even be what you're seeing, because of things like Bluebeam and things like that. That project we discussed a while back about psychoacoustic weapons and microwave and electromagnetic radiation. So there's always the possibility that reality is being very specifically honed and crafted by people who have your interests at second nature and their interests at heart.
Given the madness that's coming out, and the sheer, again, the fact that Poe's Law now exists, it's very difficult to think otherwise anymore, that something ain't right. Honestly, there's something really not right at the moment, and I don't know what's causing it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I think that fairly well wraps it up. Remember, the media's lying to you. The government is made up of terrible people who are exploiting your emotions to rule you. And yeah, smash the state, fuck the system. Have a bad morning, everybody.
Have a bad morning.
We'll see you tomorrow, folks.
Community